Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be looking at the best game of Norway chess so far. So, this is the famous game between Gukesh and Magnus, and this is the first time that Gukesh actually beats Magnus. So, this is a big moment for Gukesh as the fourth best player in the world, as it's his first time beating Magnus, the best player in the world. Oh yeah, also this is a game where Magnus famously slams the table. So we start this game off with e4, e5, which is like pretty common like in like every single game in chess. So then we follow this up with king's pawns opening. Then Magnus defends the pawn with knight to c6. Then Gukesh does the Roy Lopez, then Magnus turns this into the Roy Lopez Berlin defense. Then they both play pretty natural moves here, and here Gukesh can later move forward um in case like to push the bishop back, and maybe if Magnus tries to kick him out, then Gukesh can take and then move forward to push the bishop back and like make like an attack on Magnus. Then Magnus castles and so does Gukesh. So what Guk Magnus plays here is that he moves the pawn up to like make his position a little bit more solid. Then both player play pretty natural moves. Like this move is pretty common just to prevent knight to come here, making some offense pretty later. And Magnus plays pawn up one to try to kick the bishop out. So then Gukesh does retreat the bishop, and then Magnus pushes his pawn up for the same reason, just in case Gukesh advances his knight. So what Gukesh plays here is that he centralizes his rook, and this entire side of Gukesh isn't developed yet. While look at Magnus's, like this entire there are only two pieces, which is the queen and the bishop. And the bishop already has a pretty good position with already um a pretty good attack looking at that pawn. If Magnus can mount some kind of attack, then like knight like with some knight moves or like rerouting the queen. I'm like getting the queen into the game, then that bishop can be pretty handy. So Magnus kicks Gukesh's bishop even more out. So Gukesh retreats his bishop to c2, and Magnus retreats his bishop into safety, just in case this will come up later. And then, yeah, this tournament has been crazy. I'm surprised Gukesh actually wins this in the end game. And it's all with one blunder. It's not even like the entire game Magnus is losing. It's just like one blunder. Magnus was winning completely, and it was just one blunder. It was crazy. So then, Magnus moves his knight back to make it into a more defensive position. And both players' pawn structures are actually pretty good. Like looking at it, like both players are playing a pretty defensive position. And Magnus has like this weird pawn structure where it goes like that, but like he's the goat, so like we can't blame him. I'm like nothing can get through his defenses at this point. So then what Gukesh moves his pawn up maybe to like create an open file for the rook, and then Magnus just moves his rook to the side just to um protect the bishop and strengthen like the pawns on this side, if you know what I mean. Then Gukesh advances his pawn up. He should have done that earlier. I'm like he could have done that earlier, but it was probably weakening his position earlier, so you can't really blame him. So Magnus doesn't really take the pawn, he just moves his knight to defend it. So then Gukesh doesn't want to take, because if he takes, then the knight goes here, and then Gukesh will have to move his knight to the corner or something, or retreat, and probably have to take. And this is probably not good for him if he was gonna mount some attack sooner or later, like you're going here. So then what Magnus plays here is that he attacks that pawn on d4 with one of his own pawns, trying to not like disrupt his middle pawns. So Gukesh just follows these two knights with these two knights, and I feel like both of the players should like cancel off uh like these squares, so that these knights can't do any danger for each of the players, like any of these squares. Like Gukesh, like they can move like this pawn up, so then they can cancel the, yeah, this pawn up one, so then like here, so then it can block these two squares, and then this one is already blocking this one. So then that'll be pretty much of a trouble for Magnus, since then his knights can't like get past Gukesh's defense. So anyways, moving on. So if we move on, then oh yeah, my bad. If we move on, then Magnus takes the pawn on d4, then Gukesh just takes back. Then Magnus takes the pawn on a4. Then Gukesh takes with the bishop instead of the rook, because the rook can get into trouble with like this. Like it could be pretty much in trouble, and then he would have to retreat it back. So there's like a hole in Gukesh's defense right now. And then if Gukesh really wants, he could lock this position up with moving his pawn up one. And then yeah, so then, yeah, that's what he does here. So then, Magnus just pushes his pawn up. So then, like it's a pretty strong like thing. So Gukesh can't really invade through the queen side, and the king side is already pretty the like defended. So yeah. So then, Gukesh tries to trade knights here. I mean, yeah, he tries to trade knights, and Magnus just defends it with the discovered rook. So the rook defends it just in case Gukesh takes. So then Gukesh just moves one up just in case uh, Magnus moves bishop here or tries to threaten some kind of attack. And then Magnus takes, um, and then Gukesh takes. And then you have this pawn is very important here, since it's holding up Gukesh's pawn structure, the middle pawns, which are the most important pawns in the game. So this pawn is very important, and Magnus launches a pretty big attack soon on those pawns. Like he already has a knight staring at it, and then yeah. So then here, Magnus moves his knight forward. He could like already sacrifice his bishop, and then like he could sacrifice his bishop and make some pretty much trouble later on. Later on, he could sacrifice his bishop. So let's say if Gukesh does his next move like that, he could sacrifice, and then he would have to take, then take here. And then that's actually a pretty bad position for Magnus, as it could be like a lot of trouble. But Magnus doesn't really do this. He just continues on with the game. He just continues on with the game, and then Magnus puts rook to b4, attacking that e4 pawn, which I told you earlier was really important. And then here Gukesh moves here to uh protect the um pawn on e4, and Magnus like blocks off these three squares already. So Gukesh can't really advance knights anywhere. So this is actually really bad for Gukesh here. So then, Magnus moves his bishop to a6, and then uh, I don't know why Gukesh really plays this here, moving queen to a2, maybe to like take the free pawn on a5. Well, it's not really free since the queen is defending it, but yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know really. So then, Magnus plays the best move here, which is to attack the e4 pawn to disrupt their pawn structure, and then he's putting a lot of pressure on this pawn. There's like three pieces, big pieces attacking it, and then uh, and now he blocks off Gukesh's queen to like defend it, and like he can still maneuver his queen to like some way, but yeah. And then Gukesh also tries to defend this pawn as the best he can. Like he has also three pieces defending it now. So then Magnus plays the best move here, which is moving H pawn up one, which he can make a counteroffensive with. He since the F this knight is not here anymore. He can't really go to this position anymore. Which then, if it was there, like let's say over here. Oh, so let's say over here, if he done it, then you can literally see the eval bar going up some, because here he can hop the knight in, which actually in this position is not that good. But like later on, he can hop the knight in, which is actually really bad. Like he can advance this. Well, yeah. Well, that doesn't happen, and then Gukesh moves his knight back, and then he makes it, and then Magnus pushes his pawn up one, and then the queen takes the free pawn on a5. But here the queen can't really defend this pawn anymore since the bishop is blocking everything, and yeah. So the here oh yeah, Gukesh also invokes a queen trade here, so Magnus accepts, and then Magnus pushes the pawn up again, which threatens the knight. So the only thing knight can do is retreat. Well, here he doesn't do it yet because he attacks the rook, which the rook is more powerful than the knight. I mean, more valuable than the knight. And then Magnus plays the best move of defending the rook with another rook. So then, if he takes, then Gukesh takes. I mean, Magnus takes, which then the pawn e4 pawn is still uh defended. So then Gukesh just retreats his rook. Magnus moves his king up, and then they both just shuffle their pieces. And like this place is very. And then at this point, Gukesh just gives up his pawn by moving knight to f3. Then Magnus Carlsen takes the free knight on g3, which here Gukesh takes back, which officially seals his escape route if like the rook comes in with any like attack. Then Magnus takes with the knight, and then here both players are doing pretty good, but Magnus has a stronger position with even though Gukesh is winning, Magnus has a stronger position and he can easily launch an attack here. So then here, Magnus takes the pawn, and then he just disrupts their middle pawn structure, and then he attacks the rook with e3. And at this point, Gukesh looks like he's lost all hope. But the game continues and Gukesh refuses to resign, and that's a good thing since in this game Gukesh actually wins his first game against Magnus. So then Magnus pushes his king to f6 because this is actually endgame now. And then in get endgame you want to get your king into a more active position. Well, it's not endgame yet. It's like more of like the start of the endgame, but the start of the endgame is still useful for you to get your king like somewhat like in a defensive place, but still in a more like better position. So Magnus here goes through the pawns, and any other move here is not that good since everything else can be easily attacked with like if Magnus would have moved here, then knight to h7. Then if he moved here, then the rook is already defending it. So that was the best move. So then what Gukesh plays here is he um checks the king with the rook, and then Magnus just moves his king all the way across the board. And look at that. He moves here, then he moved 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 here. Like he like wasted like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves on just moving his king. And then Gukesh moves his other rook to attack Magnus's knight. Then Magnus attacks Gukesh's knight by with the pawn, and then Gukesh basically gives up that knight. I mean, he doesn't give it up since it's already a check and Magnus can't do anything. But he also attacks the rook, which then Gukesh another check. Then they trade rooks. Then Magnus takes with the king, so then the rook is no longer under attack. Now Gukesh moves his knight out of the way to check Magnus Carlsen's king. He makes the best move, and then here Gukesh just takes a pawn, and he checks Magnus Carlsen's king, and here, oh my god, this is the blunder of the entire year. Holy, this is the blunder of the entire year. Magnus thought he could get his pawns to the end by the time that Gukesh can take the pawns. So then Gukesh makes the best move by taking it, then Magnus takes, then Gukesh takes the rook, then Magnus runs his pawns down the board. But here Gukesh masterfully moves his knight in the best ways possible by like make sure Magnus doesn't make it to the end. So then he just keeps making the best moves. So if Gukesh didn't make this move, then it would have been game over. Because this move is the only move in the game that would have been winning for Gukesh. Like look at the eval bar if I do something like I don't know, if I like take the pawn. Look at this. Like look at the eval bar. It's a draw. But this is the only winning move for Gukesh. If I move back, it's a complete win almost for Magnus. If I move here, it's just almost a complete win. Like any other move, like even this, it's like just a complete win. Even if you take the pawn, it's a draw. That's the only move in this game where Gukesh actually wins. And I feel like it should be a brilliant, but it's not. So then, Gukesh finds that move. Then Magnus moves his other pawn up. Then Gukesh just trades pawns. Then Magnus moves his king. Gukesh. This is where Magnus realizes he's made a mistake. So then Gukesh makes the best move here. Then uh, here Magnus can't do anything. If he pushes, then take. Then no. Then he moves his king. So then if he pushes, then take. Like I'll show you. So then he moves his king here. So then if he pushes, then take here, then he can't do anything. So if he moves here, promote into anything, then just take, then promote, I don't know, promote, and then you can just move this one, and then queen, and then Magnus might try to get out, and then it's just like a complete win. Like this is like end game. Like this is the one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen in my entire life, in an entire decade. So see you next time.